For the second year in a row, I've now completed my goal of seeing every Oscar-nominated movie. This year, there were 54 films nominated. Now, of those 54 films, less than half of them are movies that get my personal stamp of approval. So over the next several minutes, I will do a rapid-fire review of all 54 films and tell you which ones, in my opinion, are worth your time. Every one of those 54 movies has something to offer. In some cases, I just did not care for the execution. I love lists and I love checking things off of those lists. So half of the fun of watching every Oscar movie was working with friends to find time to go to the theater to watch them, or mapping out release date schedules and trying to fit in every movie around my busy schedule. Even though more than half of these films I will most likely never watch again, I still had to see what the industry experts said were the best films of the year. Every year, a handful of movies that I never would have watched otherwise if they weren't nominated became my favorite movies of the year. And that alone is why I took the time to watch every single one of them. This year, I don't really have any strong opinions about who should win in each category. I just love movies, and I want to share the good ones with you all. Without further ado, let's review some movies. Let's just go ahead and kick this off with probably the saddest movie on the list. A documentary about children in a Ukrainian orphanage is as depressing as it sounds. It was filmed before the war broke out, so I can't even imagine how much worse things have gotten. The kids in this are so brave and resilient, and most more mature than I would be in their situation. Seeing two kids not much older than 5 years old talking about drinking beer with their moms, or a kid who acts out to authority but then is a loving brother to his younger siblings is heartbreaking. The two guys in this have really found their purpose, caring for a very specific breed of bird called a kite, which is similar to a hawk. These birds are getting sick because of the growing pollution, and these guys have to work even harder to make a difference. It is important, yet thankless work. The documentary has some wonderful shots of these birds. My favorite was a little guy getting a bubble bath and how content and happy he looked. The documentary is very slowly paced, and my mind wandered more than I wanted it to. Nan Goldin has this incredible drive to bring down the family that caused the opioid epidemic. Beneath the surface is a very complex and well-respected individual who has been on the cutting edge of social justice for over 40 years. Nan's life is so much more tragic and interesting than I could have ever imagined. This is a great supplemental viewing experience to Hulu's miniseries Dope Sick. I dug the concept of fulfilling a bucket list and loved the interaction between the two brothers. I can't place exactly what it was, but even though I liked all of the components that made up this short, I didn't actually love the finished product. This is my favorite of the animated shorts. It isn't trying to change my mind or open my eyes to an atrocity that's happening somewhere in the world. This is just pure creativity. It feels like a story Charlie Kaufman would tell using stop motion. Wait. Charlie Kaufman actually made a stop-motion movie, and it's nothing like that. But it still feels like a Charlie Kaufman story. It's fun and creative, and it's full of so much imagination and ingenuity. This is a slow burn, but I fell in love with the art style, and by the end, I fell into the groove of the slow pacing. The dialogue is full of clever, life-affirming quips that sound like something Winnie the Pooh would say. I got fairly emotional at the end, too, which I did not expect. I've decided after watching this that I have a new favorite animal. I'm so glad that there are people out there who care for stray elephants in such a wonderful way. My heart melted watching the young elephant reach around the door to grab a Ritz cracker with its trunk. Elephants are smarter and more emotional than I ever realized. To find a passion you are happy spending every waking moment of your life pursuing is a gift most people don't have. To find a partner who loves that hobby as much as you is even rarer. This documentary isn't as fast-paced as I wanted it to be, but it is well worth watching just to see the unbelievable close-up shots of volcanoes erupting. Our two leads are very brave, or maybe very stupid, probably both. It is hard to believe that this is based on a true story. I enjoyed the animation style, especially at the beginning with the little boating community. It is short, and I'm glad I watched it, but I didn't really feel like it pushed the art of animation forward or told a story that really needed to be heard. I always thought the loneliest person in the world was the lighthouse operator. I now think it's maybe the walrus researcher in this short film. There are some really cool shots of the scenery, and the amount of walruses you see in this is astonishing. It's just really slow, and it's about 15 minutes too long, which is saying something because it's not much longer than 15 minutes. This may be my favorite of the shorts. It's a simple concept that took a lot of dedication to complete, but any one of us could have done the same thing. In under 30 minutes, we witness the entire childhood of a young girl and see her bond with her parents and her animals. This is basically a real-life version of Richard Linklater's Boyhood. It is very charming. Loved the animation style, and I loved that it didn't need any dialogue to build up the characters or get the message across. The job in this film surely doesn't exist, but if it did, I bet some adrenaline junkies would love it. It is definitely not a job that I would be interested in. I found the ending to be a bit too convenient after the entire short was spent with our characters wasting money every single day just buying new hats. There were so many great shots in this of the beautiful countryside. I loved the little girl who was on a mission for the entire short. I did not expect things to get quite as dark as they did. Very well executed. All of the girls in this were very cute. The costumes and the set designs were way better than I expected in a short film. I just didn't connect with the story and found it to be a bit boring. Martha Mitchell wore me out during this documentary short, but I'm glad that she did, and I'm glad that she was as outspoken as she was. Because of her, a lot of things came to light that we otherwise may have never known about. It's amazing how little I know about Watergate, even though it happened less than 10 years before I was born. How could you not want to watch a film with a name like this? The title means more than one thing, but it also means exactly what you think it means. It is pretty cute and charming. It takes a lot of guts to tell this story about your own life. There is a very awkward and embarrassing scene towards the end that had me on edge. Now, if you want to relive your awkward teenage years, this is the short for you. Hands down, this is the best documentary I have seen in a long time. Americans complain about the fairness of their elections. Watch this to see what true unfairness is. Navalny is such a brave, charismatic guy who just wants fairness in Russia. And just speaking that thought aloud is enough to endanger his life. The scene where he is calling around trying to find out who attempted to assassinate him is one of the most tense and unreal scenes in any documentary that I've ever seen. This is basically a real-life spy movie happening today. I liked this. I didn't love this. I understood that the subject matter is why it was nominated for an Oscar. I just don't feel that it was executed in a way that is going to be eye-opening to the people who need to hear the message. It was well made and it was well shot, and I liked the characters. It just didn't feel Oscar-worthy. This is my favorite of the live action shorts. It is packed full of so much tension and stress in just 17 minutes. Being in a new country where you don't speak the language is stressful enough, without all the other stuff going on that I won't spoil here. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, but at the end of this short, I kind of felt duped. The filmmakers did everything they could to paint a picture and make me feel ashamed that I didn't remember such a horrible act just a couple of hours away from my home. And then the rug got pulled out from under me. It is definitely an important story, and while I usually love bait and switch in narrative films, I just didn't care for the way the story was told about this real life event. This may be the movie that I've thought about the most after watching it. It's slow and a bit depressing, but it is so emotionally complex that no two people are going to walk away with the same message. I can't wait to see this again, to see all the little things that I missed that are going to reshape my thoughts about the film and my own life. This is up there with 1917 as being one of my all-time favorite war films. I've never seen the other versions of the film or read the book that it's based on, but I can't imagine that they are any better than this. World War I seems like an absolute nightmare. I've been telling everyone I know they need to watch this. A pretty standard courtroom drama about yet another atrocity that I'd never heard about. While I don't think it's as good as some of the other classic courtroom dramas, it is well worth a one-time watch. The world is full of some really hardworking, honest people and also some horrible monsters. One of the most visually stunning films I have ever watched. Story-wise, it is better than the original, but in my opinion, you should not be watching this for the story. You should be watching it to see the crazy robotic technology, alien creatures, and beautiful jungles and oceans that James Cameron and crew created. Turn up the stereo and sit as close to the TV as you can and spend 3 hours on an alien planet. It's hard to believe that the director of Whiplash and La La Land provided the most WTF movie of the year. I'm not sure I've ever watched a movie more off the rails than Babylon. Less than 2 minutes into its 3-hour runtime and I knew it was going to be a wild ride. It feels like a fictional version of early Hollywood, much like Inglourious Basterds is a fictional version of World War II. It's over the top in every way imaginable, and I will never be able to look at my grandparents' generation the same way again. I really wanted to like this more than I did. It's definitely a me problem because everyone else I know absolutely loves it. I did like some of the dialogue and thought the acting was great, particularly Barry Keoghan. I just found it a bit slow and the story didn't really take me where I wanted to go. Beautiful cinematography, but the movie was really hard to follow. It was very strange in parts, and I really liked those strange scenes, including the intro with a mother giving birth to a baby in a way that I've never seen before. The movie seemed to keep going and going and going, and then when it ended, I had no idea what I had just watched. Reading about it later, turns out it's pretty genius. Unfortunately, I didn't like the movie enough to rewatch it again, knowing what I was watching. It was too long, too dark, too serious, everyone whispered too much, but I loved every minute of it. Pattinson's Batman was surprisingly good. All of the villains were the best that they've ever been, and Gotham was a sleazy, rainy mess. It is absolutely one of the best Batman movies to date. I really want to like Marvel movies more than I do. Each one feels and looks the same. The plot points all hit in a very formulaic way throughout the movie, and the ending is always a CGI fight where none of the good guys get hurt. And that fight is hard to follow because so much is going on. Angela Bassett is a great actress. I just don't think her performance is one of the best of the year. I don't even think it was the best in this movie. Ana de Armas was great as Marilyn Monroe, even though she didn't even attempt to get rid of her accent. The movie started off strong with a heartbreaking intro where young Norma Jean is living with an abusive mother. Then the plot and direction lost me. I was never able to connect because everything just felt so dreamlike, and every scene dragged out due to the slow pacing of every conversation. Sometimes I forget just how great of an actress Jennifer Lawrence is. Brian Tyree Henry plays a much more complex character here than I've seen him play before. The story is pretty slow and calm, but the acting and characters feel very real and very lived in. I teared up a couple of times throughout this movie. This was a very good portrayal of the after effects of trauma and depression. You will not find better child actors than the kids in this movie. The story about two best friends who start to drift apart when kids at school start to make fun of their friendship is something I think most people can relate to. This is a very somber and sad coming-of-age story. It's very raw, with many scenes having very little or no dialogue. The close-up shots of the incredible actors' faces tell the story. It is probably the best representation of middle school since Bo Burnham's 8th grade. Austin Butler was amazing as Elvis. Tom Hanks, who I usually like, felt more like a video game villain, and the direction and editing was just all a bit too much. I did enjoy learning a little bit more about Elvis in that wham bam biopic fashion, and there were some really good scenes, but all of the over-the-top director's choices kind of took me out of the story. This should have been a home run. Sam Mendes directing, Roger Deakins doing the cinematography, Olivia Colman and Colin Firth acting, and a triple threat of stories including a love letter to cinema, a look at mental illness, and the race wars in the early 1980s in the United Kingdom. Somehow, the movie just didn't work. It was fairly boring, and even though the acting and the cinematography was great, it just wasn't enough to make up for everything else. I love donkeys, and the character of EO was no exception. I appreciate the filmmakers tried to tell a story from the perspective of the donkey, but I did not like the execution of this at all. I found the story to be pretty slow, and the lack of much dialogue just made it feel even slower. There isn't any animal violence shown on screen, but plenty of it is implied, and that is enough to ruin any animal lover's day. The Daniels are in the 100% club for me. Everything they do is amazing. This film feels like a low-budget version of The Matrix, but just because the budget was small meant they had to get huge with the creativity. The editing in this is some of the best that I have ever seen, sometimes cutting together hundreds of shots into a very short scene. I bet I missed 100 jokes in this because the cuts were all so quick. It is one of the funniest movies of the year and is definitely the most creative. It is the most accessible of all of the Daniels filmography, but I can also guarantee that you've never seen anything like this. This is my personal pick for Best Picture. There is a reason that Steven Spielberg is a household name, and that name is synonymous with filmmaking. I loved seeing him create a movie loosely based on his childhood. While there are definitely a few dark scenes, I would still consider this to be the feel-good movie of the year. I just love seeing people discover their passion, and Spielberg captures that magic better than anybody. The original Knives Out was my favorite movie of 2019, and I like this one almost as much. Because it's a sequel, it doesn't feel quite as original, but I like the set pieces here just a little bit more. If you think too hard about the plot, you can probably find a lot of plot holes, but if you just sit back and enjoy the ride, you're going to have a great time. I'm already looking forward to the next Benoit Blanc movie. Without a doubt, this is the best version of Pinocchio ever captured on film. I've just seen that story so many times in my life that it didn't feel completely original, even though there were definitely some new dark directions that the story went. Animation is flawless, and the last 5 minutes did have me tear up a little bit. This is one of those movies that if I had watched it at home, I'd probably get distracted and play on my phone due to its slow pacing and understated everything else. Seeing it in the theater, I was able to concentrate and kind of got into that calm slowness of the story. If you are a fan of everyone dressing in their Sunday best every single day and calling each other Mr. This and Mrs. That, this is a movie for you. It truly feels like it was made in the 1950s. The overall message is that we all need to stop and smell the roses more, and I think the slow pacing was trying to force us to do just that. It has a timeless message, but I don't think it will go down as a classic. I wish that I had seen this before all of the hype. I remember the original YouTube shorts from back in the day, and I always thought those were cute. This is more of the same, and Marcel is such a fun and innocent character who has a unique view on the world. The animation is very well done. I just didn't connect to the story as much as I wanted to. I could tell by the name and the poster that I was going to enjoy this movie. It has the stunning sets, costumes, and just general pop of color that I love in The Marvelous Miss Maisel, the comically pretentious fashionistas from The Devil Wears Prada, and the eternal optimist of effortless charm of Judi Dench's Philomena. It is formulaic, but it's so enjoyable. I had a smile on my face the entire movie. In my opinion, this is the best movie in the Shrek universe since that original film. I like the new and improved animation style, which was clearly drawing inspiration from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. The story was cute, and I love how even though it felt like scraping the bottom of the barrel for new characters, they were more interesting than I thought could be possible. Who would have thought little Jack Horner who sat in a corner would be such a great villain? Earlier in this video, I said that you would not find better child actors than the kids in the movie Close. That may still be true, but Catherine Clinch as a titular quiet girl is a very close second. The foreign language category is killing it this year with child actors. The story is kind of quiet and subdued, which matches the color palettes. It's about a young girl in 1981 who goes to live with her relatives while her mother navigates the end of her pregnancy. It kind of sneaks up on you. Started slow, and then you grow to love the characters more and more, and it ends on a perfect note. This one is guaranteed to stir up some emotions. You know that picture of the guy listening to music loudly being blown back in his chair? That picture sums up this movie. It is easily the best superhero movie of the year, and it features no superheroes. I can't say enough great things about RRR. The bromance, the dance numbers, the insane inventive fight scenes, the animals, the love story. It was so good, I now pretty much just want to watch Indian films for the next year. I thought the animation in this was better than any of the other nominees. Animating water is tough. It was done flawlessly here. The story is a bit predictable and it takes a bit too many beats from How to Train Your Dragon, but I found the monster designs to be the best I've seen since Love and Monsters. It has a huge sound. Crank it up so that the walls in the house shake with every wave crash and monster attack. Cate Blanchett is a lock for Best Actress. Her performance is incredible. The movie itself I felt was a bit too long and tedious. I didn't really enjoy the journey, but I appreciate how well executed and realistic everything was. I don't feel like I'm grown up or mature enough to get a movie like this. An anthology of 7 short films telling a story from a woman's perspective. Concept and stories were good. The execution, some of these shorts felt like a low-budget Lifetime movie. Of the 7, there are 2 worth watching. The 4th and 5th segments about the Asian mother with 2 small children and the veterinarian who is helping a woman with a hurt dog. Watch those 2 and save yourself an hour and 20 minutes and skip the rest. Andrea Riseborough did a great job acting in this. I'm not sure that it's a top 5 acting performance of the year, but she worked her butt off marketing herself to the Oscar nomination board, so props to her. The story was interesting, but I wasn't always a fan of the way they went about telling it. It has the same vibe as a Sean Baker film, like The Florida Project or Red Rocket, where everyone lives in pretty nasty conditions, has some mental issues, and could really use a bath. Movies do not get any more crowd-pleasing than this. In my opinion, this blows the original Top Gun out of the water. This was the first time I truly felt the insane power of fighter jets. The shots from inside the cockpit and underneath the plane are some of my favorites of the year. It didn't reinvent the wheel. It just made it perfectly round. I could watch this 10 times and not get sick of it. This is a bit too long, and the first third of the movie felt unnecessary, even though I enjoyed it. The writing is great, and the entire movie is worth watching just for the captain's dinner. I laughed, I gagged, and I thought a lot about what the characters were saying. It's a dark comedy with a very blatant message. The ultra-rich are ridiculous. It's a lot more fun and entertaining than I was expecting. An important story told in an interesting way. This was cute and entertaining and full of wonderful animation. It just didn't quite hit me like a lot of other Pixar films do. Brendan Fraser is every bit as good in this role as I had heard. The movie is a hard watch. It's depressing and devastating. It is almost always emotionally challenging and sometimes visually challenging as well. It is full of great acting, and hours after I finished, I started having little revelations about some of the characters' choices. Much like almost every Darren Aronofsky film, it is a challenge to watch, but it's well worth the time and emotional investment to do so. There has never been a title that describes a movie better than Women Talking. 90% of this movie takes place in a single location, with women from different generations in a very secluded religious community discussing options after a horrible tragedy is uncovered. The film discusses important, topical, and timeless subjects that are not fun to think about. This feels very much like a play brought to screen. While I did not enjoy the journey, I'm glad that I experienced it. Its execution reminds me of other movies that take place in a single location, like The Big Chill, The Man from Earth, and even the movie I discussed 20 seconds ago, The Whale. As always, congratulations to all of the nominees. Your hard work in 2022 has solidified your place in movie history. I cannot wait to see what amazing movies come out in 2023.